This next presenter is, there's all these things that I wouldn't have drawn a connection to, but Bitcoiners can just draw connections from a world they're already excited about to Bitcoin, right? So this next panel, he is a YouTuber, he's a medical doctor, and an author, as you can see right here, and he wants to talk about the connection between Bitcoin and psychedelics. So let's get fired up. Let's come on, you guys. Big round of applause for Ioni Appelberg, ladies and gentlemen.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Before we dive into this incredibly fascinating topic of Bitcoin and psychedelics, I have a warm-up question for you, just for fun. Does anybody know what happens when you give psychedelics to a spider? I'm phrasing it like there's going to be a punchline, but sadly there is not. I can give you a hint, though. It does not become Spider-Man. Tripping on his acid, it might think it becomes Spider-Man, but it does not. I actually have the answer right here. The image on the left is a reference, but I want you to focus on the image on the right. And this is a real image. This web was produced by a spider that was given LSD, one of the classic psychedelics. And it produced this peculiar-looking web consisting of only the straight lines, neglecting the circular plane of the web altogether. See, and I have a theory of why it did this. See, at the time of making this web, this spider was in the psychedelic realm. And I imagine this spider in the psychedelic realm, looking back at its physical universe, which is basically just its web. Spiders don't have a lot going on, to be frank. But they do seem to like their webs a lot. So in the psychedelic realm, it is observing its physical universe, its spider web, and it's coming to the conclusion that so much of its support systems, so much of its stuff, is entirely redundant. So it was perfectly content with just half a web. Now, this is a half joke, but it has some morale. It is relevant to us because whenever we visit the psychedelic realm, we can look back at our physical universe and come to the same conclusion that so much of our stuff and so much of our support systems is entirely redundant because everything is perfect just the way it is. And it's all going to be okay. My name is Ioni Appelberg. I am a YouTuber and a medical doctor. On my YouTube channel, I make whiteboard explainer videos about Bitcoin, mostly about the philosophical aspects. Cartoon-like animations to explain the philosophy behind Bitcoin. And I've collaborated quite a bit with Knut Svanholm and Guy Swan on these videos. Has anybody seen our work on YouTube? Please raise your hands. Oh, there's a few of you. Perfect. That's amazing. And I've recently come to learn that quite a few people use my channel to orange pill their friends. So now you have a tool for that. You're welcome. And I'm also the author of Abundance Through Scarcity. Abundance Through Scarcity is about the importance of Bitcoin for the future of human civilization. And the central premise is that the kind of money that we have determines what kind of civilization we can build. And Abundance Through Scarcity has some big and mind-bending ideas about Bitcoin. And I can almost guarantee that if you read Abundance Through Scarcity, you are going to fall in love with Bitcoin like never before. I also firmly believe that Abundance Through Scarcity is going to be one of the fundamental pillars in a lot of people's Bitcoin journeys. And finally, I am a psychonaut. A psychonaut is someone who explores the nature of consciousness through the use of psychedelics. And as a Bitcoiner and a psychonaut, I have spent a significant amount of time exploring that intersection, the intersection between money and consciousness. and I've said this many times before, examining Bitcoin from the psychedelic state has taught me things about Bitcoin that I don't think that any person or any book could have ever conveyed. There are also few things that have convinced me as much of Bitcoin's prosperous future as observing it from the psychedelic state. And one thing that I've learned is that Bitcoin is for the economy what psychedelics are for the mind. In other words, Bitcoin is an economic psychedelic. And this is an incredibly useful insight because it has taught me, or rather it has spawned a ton of great new analogies that have helped me see Bitcoin in an entirely new light. And today, we're going to explore one of those analogies, a carefully crafted one that I have selected specifically for you. So, sit back, relax, and let me take you on a trip. So I'm sure some of you have seen this image before, but if you haven't, don't worry, I will explain it. This is a visual representation of how different parts in the brain are connected. The bubbles represent different regions of the brain. And the colors show which regions work together to form functioning systems, like the auditory system, the visual system, the motor system, and so on. And the lines show which regions communicate, and the thickness of the lines show the strength of that communication. Now, buckle up. This is a brain on psilocybin, the psychedelic compound found in psychedelic mushrooms. And this we call hyperconnectivity. This image shows how psilocybin creates this wild symphony of connectivity in the brain, which we call hyperconnectivity. And here's what's going on. Psilocybin unlocks doors between different regions of the brain that normally remain shut. For example, vision and hearing normally don't communicate. They are senses that operate independently of one another. But psilocybin changes this, which lets you, for example, psilocybin changes this by forging new connections between vision and hearing, which lets you, for example, hear colors, to hear the sound of the color red, or to experience a Picasso painting like a piece of music. Moreover, it lets you see sounds, like the melody of a Mozart symphony manifesting in vibrant, intangible forms in the space around you. So we can imagine walking through an art gallery, listening to the paintings, or going to a classical music concert, and letting your hands dance through the air, touching the melodies. But what's even more fascinating is that when we ingest psychedelics, it gives us a new mental operating system with new mental capabilities, such as hearing colors and seeing sounds. But also, it lets you think differently. It lets you think deeper. It gives you the ability to peer beyond physical reality. It lets you think differently. And this is a phrase that a lot of you probably have heard before. Where does it come from? It comes from Apple. A few people know this, but Silicon Valley, or the engine behind Silicon Valley, is largely psychedelics. So psychedelics have contributed quite significantly to a number of very meaningful breakthroughs in a variety of fields, from the arts to the philosophies to the sciences. The philosophies, for example, have been extensively enriched with literature, insights, discussions that have been paradigm shifting. So what is philosophy? Philosophy is the study of how human beings relate to the world and relate to themselves. And psychedelics have showed us that reality is not what it appears to be. And that is a fundamental shift in our relationship with the world and with the cosmos and with ourselves. And psychedelics have changed how humanity relates to the world. And that is very significant. And on the scientific frontier, psychedelics have helped to produce a number of very significant breakthroughs and discoveries, Nobel Prize-winning discoveries. For example, the discovery of the molecular structure of the DNA molecule, the DNA double helix, discovered by Watson and Crick. One of the most fundamental and most important discoveries of biology of all time. And a more recent one is the discovery or the invention of the PCR technology by Kary Mullis. PCR technology is a fundamental technology that we use in any scientific field that uses biology. So that would be, it opened the field of genetics. And it has catapulted forensic sciences to a modern science. And it is used in pharmaceuticals and medicine, in any area that deals with biology. And what it does is that it augments small amounts of DNA. And it has changed how we work with biology forever. And we would maybe not have these technologies without psychedelics. And another thing that I find incredibly fascinating with psychedelics is that they have spurred a shift in our notion about the idea, or about our ideas about the origin of consciousness. So the traditional view, the traditional scientific view about consciousness is that it emerges from the biological brain, right? That the biological brain produces consciousness. We just don't know how. And we now have 70 years of data and research into the hard problem of consciousness. And the hard problem of consciousness is, how does the brain produce consciousness? We now have 70 years of data and research into this problem, and we have gotten nowhere. Let me say that again. We have 70 years of data and research into the hard problem of consciousness, and we have gotten nowhere. We know nothing more about the origin of consciousness or what it is today than we did 70 years ago. But this non-data is also very important data, because it tells us that we might be barking up the wrong tree. Maybe the question isn't, how does the brain produce consciousness? Maybe we need to broaden that question. Enter panpsychism. Has anybody heard of panpsychism before? Excellent. Keep your hands up. Perfect. Oh, that's a few of you. And to those of you who have heard about panpsychism, does any of you who have your hand up think there's something to the idea? Perfect. Keep your hands up. So everybody who does not have your hand up, look at the people who have their hands up. This is what a psychonaut looks like. So panpsychism is the idea that the brain does not produce consciousness, but rather receives consciousness. And this is an idea that sounds very science fiction-like. So prepare for strangeness. The idea is that panpsychism, or that consciousness, exists as a universal field within the universe, as a fundamental property of the universe, which a sufficiently complex enough structure like the brain can receive to produce what we experience as self-awareness. And a good approach to this idea is vision. So our vision does exactly that. It makes use of a fundamental property of the universe, namely electromagnetic waves. And it makes use of electromagnetic waves to produce what we experience as a vision. But what we see, our vision, is not representative of base reality, of objective reality. Colors, shapes, these things are not properties of electromagnetic waves. These are mental constructs. So we live in a simulation. We will never experience base reality. It is incomprehensible. Because in order to comprehend reality, base reality, you need to apply a lens. And we apply our biological aperture to look at base reality. And when we do that, we distort it. So we will never be able to see base reality. So the idea here is that the brain makes use of some kind of field, very similar to, for example, the Higgs field. The Higgs field was something that was proven in 2012. It was given the Nobel Prize. And the Higgs field is what gives elementary particles mass. And we can understand it by analogy as a field that consists of syrup in space, so that anything that moves it experiences resistance, and that gives the particles resistance. And we can play with the idea here that consciousness may be a very similar thing, that anything that moves through this field and is sufficiently complex can make use of this field to produce something like self-awareness. Very good. Can I ask the AV to scroll a little bit? Perfect. Thank you. So that is what psychedelics have done for science. In terms of cultural impact, the profound marks left on society by absolute legends like Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, and artists like Alex Gray and writers like Aldous Huxley may not have existed without psychedelics. So the point I want to make here is that the hyperconnected brain is capable of achieving amazing things, from Nobel Prize-winning scientific discoveries to paradigm-shifting philosophical insights to some of the greatest music and literature and art ever produced by human hands. Yeah? So let's now connect this to Bitcoin. In the same way that psilocybin increases the number and strength of neurological connections in the brain, Bitcoin increases the number and strength of economic connections in the world. Bitcoin increases communication across the entire planet, granting us new capabilities as a civilization in much the same way that psychedelics increase communication within the brain, granting us new capabilities as conscious beings. About 4 billion people are currently excluded from the global economic apparatus. That's half the human population not participating in the global economy. But when that other half joins the internet and the Bitcoin network, it will be the single greatest economic infusion in the history of our species. But Bitcoin doesn't just help to improve the economy or onboard the other half. No, Bitcoin is an entirely new kind of economic operating system. And hear me clearly when I say this. Bitcoin is an entirely new kind of economic operating system with an inbuilt hyperconnectivity, connecting the entire human race on a single, open, and neutral monetary network that uses money that cannot be corrupted to spy on you and that cannot be corrupted to steal from you. Oh, thank you. And just like a hyper-connected brain gives people new capabilities, a hyper-connected economy gives society new capabilities. And Bitcoin enables us to make the most of our civilization through economic hyperconnectivity in much the same way that psychedelics help us make the most of our brains through neurological hyperconnectivity. Again, some of the greatest works of art, some of the greatest insights in philosophy, some of the greatest scientific discoveries ever produced by humankind are attributed to psychedelics. And we can now do the same for the economy by giving the economy the psychedelic experience it so desperately needs by giving it Bitcoin. Bitcoin is giving the economy a psychedelic experience, and we have yet to see what that means. We know what it means for humanity and society because we have used psychedelics on our brain. We have yet to see the effects of Bitcoin on the economy and what hyperconnectivity is going to mean for our civilization. So for the final few minutes, let's see what this hyperconnectivity actually means for the world. Communication is the bedrock of our civilization. We progress socially, economically, and technologically by advancing our communication tools. Imagine a world without language, the written word, roads, ships, airplanes, postal services, the internet, and monetary networks. And it becomes abundantly clear that our civilization rests on our communication tools. We need language to communicate ideas. We need roads, ships, and airplanes to move goods, services, and people. We need postal services and the internet to move information. And we need monetary networks to move value. And Bitcoin is our most recent one. Bitcoin is our most recent communication technology that lets us move value freely between one another in cyberspace across the entire world without the need for a third party. And this has never existed before. So let me wrap this up. Psilocybin, or psychedelics, give us a new mental operating system that gives us new mental capabilities. And Bitcoin gives us a new economic operating system that enhances communication of value in society and gives civilization new capabilities. And for example, Bitcoin invites all of humanity to the global economy. And the downstream effects of connecting 8 billion minds on a single monetary network like Bitcoin are enormous. This connectivity, this increased bandwidth for potential will catalyze social, economic, and technological progress that we can hardly fathom. So, in the same fashion that psychedelics have helped to produce some of the greatest works of art, some of the greatest philosophical insights, some of the greatest scientific discoveries, Bitcoin is going to do for civilization. Because we progress socially, economically, and technologically by advancing our communication tools and our economy. And this openness and neutrality, this real capacity for growth is something that our current economic system simply lacks. So this is it for the presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We have time for a few questions. If anybody has any question. Yes, please, sir.
Can I just thank you for your proof of work video? It's the #1 best educational resource on Bitcoin. Hello? Okay. Thank you for your YouTube video on proof of work. I know that's a tangent, but it is the #1 best learning resource I have ever seen on proof of work, which is the heartbeat of the network. So thank you, and I don't know if you maybe want to comment on how that ties in.
Sure. Perfect. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, and thank you for shilling my product. If you haven't seen my early YouTube videos about, for example, proof of work, I also find it to be a great source of of education, because what I do on my YouTube channel is that I break down complex topics and repackage it in a way that is very simple to digest. And that is why it's an excellent tool to orange pill your friends. And in my forthcoming book, which is going to be titled Hyperconnectivity, I will be talking about Bitcoin and psychedelics and how they relate. I gave you one analogy today. And this book is going to contain several, and proof of work is going to be in that book. And I'm still working on that, and I have a few ideas, and I would love to discuss that with you. But we have limited time here, and it's a fairly big topic, and I would love to have that discussion. And if it bears fruit, I'm going to make some content from that. So thank you for the question.
Hi.
Anything else? Yes, please, sir.
So I had my hand up for your earlier questions and kept it up. But I was interested in this sort of, I know it's a contradiction, or yin and yang, but you've got cryptography there at the heart of Bitcoin, and then we've got this free thinking. I just wondered if you could give us some comments or insights on what I might see as contradiction of mathematical certainty, the freedom of expression, hyperconnectivity. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but you got cryptography, maths of rules can't be broken. And then you've got this explosion of creativity. I just like it. It's like night and day, black and white. Seems natural, but I just wondered if you had any observations or thoughts on cryptography and psychedelics.
Sure. Okay. So your question explores the idea of having maths and cryptography on one side, and how that can lead to creativity on the other side, as they could be seen as opposing forces almost. Am I understanding you correctly? Yes. And this is this is an insightful question. However, it bears some remnants from how we used to look at these topics. But creativity is a very, very scientific endeavor. And I would say that in the same sense that the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin can produce abundance through scarcity. In the same sense that scarcity can produce abundance in society, if we restrict our creative capabilities by working through mathematics or cryptography, that is a perfect way to be creative, I think. Limitations on creativity is actually how artists work. You don't see Van Gogh using a cello to produce paintings. You don't see him using watercolors. You don't see him using anything but oil and acrylic, for instance. And that is a very strict limitation. And as an impressionist, the impressionists don't use one technology. They use one technique. So if we limit ourselves, that is how creativity actually explodes. Do we have time for one more question?
I got it.
One more. Yes, please, sir. Okay.
Sorry, I got the mic already. If you had to speculate, would you speculate that Satoshi was under the influence of psychedelics when he crafted his vision for Bitcoin?
What a wonderful question. Applaud for that question, please. Yes. As I said in the beginning, psychedelics is the engine behind Silicon Valley. Talk to any of the guys in Palo Alto or in Silicon Valley, and they will tell you that how incredibly helped they have been by microdosing or having great insights. There are some great studies to show how psychedelics can actually be used as a technology to release your ideas and to tie them together and to peer beyond reality and your problems and make new connections that you haven't been able to do before. And that is why humanity has been able to produce all these amazing discoveries and works of art on psychedelics. And it would surprise me if we could make these groundbreaking discoveries, civilization-altering technologies and discoveries without the use of a different type of thinking. Like imagine the first few apes who started using tools, starting to tame fire. That happened over thousands of years. but we have been using psychedelics for longer than we have been Homo sapiens. When we were apes, when we were great apes, we still are great apes, but when we were before Homo sapiens, we took what we found on the ground and ate it. And this has spurred a cultural revolution unlike any other. This is when we began having festivities and a new type of culture, maybe language. These things are what changes. These things change civilization, and we need these kinds of engines to achieve these kind of groundbreaking discoveries. Thank you for that question. And I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.